Well, thank you very much and good afternoon, very good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to this panel debate with very interesting, outstanding speakers that we have entitled CCI Programs, Identifying and Bridging the Gaps. My name is Albinyana. I'm the Managing Director of IEMed, and I'd like to start by thanking the hard work that both the teams of EMEA as coordinator of this project, CREACT4MED, alongside the team of IEMed have been doing during the last maybe couple of months or 3 months to ensure that this annual conference, like it was the annual conference before, becomes a success. And I would also like to start just to break a little bit the ice by mentioning that 14% of the GDP. This is something I learned only last week because I had a meeting with the City Hall of Barcelona and some of the economic main sectors of the city. I learned that 14% of the GDP in the city of Barcelona is already devoted to CCI, which for me was good to know, because even though it's a very fragmented economic sector, it's becoming to be one of the together with other economic sectors like tourism, also like ICT, are becoming to be very important sectors in the economy. And of course, what we want to discuss in this session is the gaps that exist between the sector itself and what the sector might need from both the public sector, but also the private sector itself, like the banking institutions. Because we all know that even though also in the Mediterranean region, the CCI is one of the key sectors of the economy, is sometimes lacking support and sometimes is lacking the tools and the instruments to especially grow and become mature. We all know that CCIs are enablers of sustainable development, thanks to the capacity to recreate and redesign unsustainable practices. We also know that the European Commission has been placing a lot of importance to the CCI in the region, namely in the southern and eastern Mediterranean countries. We saw that during the presentation of the new agenda for the Mediterranean last year, where the CCI sector has an important place in this strategy. And we also know that the culture and creative industries generate economic growth and employ a lot of young people. And probably, if we look, and this is probably something that both Rim and Yagane could or have already confirmed, if we look at how young people are especially employed in the region by sectors, of course, the CCI is one of the main sectors. I have lots of figures from the World Bank, which I'm not going to mention because we want to hear what the panelists have to say. But I truly believe, and especially in the context that we are living now, with the post-COVID-19, with the also the Ukrainian war, that we really need to make an effort from the public sector side, but also from the private sector side, to provide these tools to the CCI so that we can strengthen and enhance the CCI in the southern Mediterranean. Okay, I will not bore you with details on how is the economic situation in the south. It's not easy, neither in the north of the Mediterranean, especially the north due to the inflation, but also in the south with the food security crisis. Of course, there are countries and countries because it's not the same when you look at the situation in Algeria compared with other countries like Lebanon. But still we are there, and that is important. This project is advancing, and that's thanks to the work that is behind the project. And I think the European institutions, when commissioning EMEA and the consortium of the CREACT4MED, this project, they are thinking on how to better connect the needs of the CCI with those of the private sector. So very happy to be here, and now without further ado, I will introduce the first speaker, who is good friend Enrique de Villamore. He's been the director of MedWaves since 2010, and he jointly led a process of transformation of the center when it was still the regional activity center into what is right now the MedWaves, which is a reference for let's say alternative economic sectors such as green, blue, and also CCI, and how you are supporting and helping. So Enrique, tell us more about the CCIs and how you're supporting the CCIs.
Thank you very much, Roger, for the introduction. Thank you to colleagues of EMEA and IEMed to invite us to join you this conference. Very briefly, just to say a few words about what we do in our center. So one of the most important type of activities that we develop is supporting entrepreneurs from the MENA region, Maghreb, as well as also countries from the Eastern Mediterranean region. And those kind of entrepreneurs that are specifically focused on creating not only economic, but also environmental and social value. So it's what we call green or sustainable entrepreneurs. Or even we give them, let's say, a name in order to differentiate them, a kind of nombre propio, which we call them switchers. So basically, since the last 12 years, we have been developing this program in which we provide support to this type of entrepreneurs with specific kind of services, including training, coaching services, and also supporting access to markets, and also in helping them to connect to other entrepreneurs. In order to cut the story short, let's say that the added value of the type of services we provide belongs to the idea that in the methodology of training the entrepreneur, we guide them on how to design the business model in a way that from the very beginning is creating some kind of environmental and social value. So making them to think on how their business can be designed in a way that is basically, apart from providing some kind of economic gainings for the entrepreneur, for the businessman or woman, also is, let's say, improving somehow the environment and also the social inclusivity and so on and so forth. We, on the one hand, are very glad because we didn't know nothing about entrepreneurship in the region, specifically on green entrepreneurship. So I'm talking about entrepreneurship for eco-design, waste prevention, waste management, sustainable energies, sustainable housing, sustainable tourism, and so on and so forth. And we made a first call. It was about 6 years ago, and we received about, I would say, 5,000 applications. So that was pretty impressive. Also because we had to do it in very short time. So that showed us that there is a huge, a lot of ideas of entrepreneurs about how to develop greenhouse, stable housing, or, well, this type of sector I was mentioning to you. So that's great on the one hand. Also was it's good also that there is in parallel, let's say, increasing, let's say, commitment from the policy point of view with regard to the support of these specific entrepreneurs, because you just think that I'm sure that you know personally that in our countries, or most of our countries, specifically in the Mediterranean region, unfortunately, entrepreneurship is not normally supported by the system, the regulatory system. so are difficult, even from even the education systems. Children is not educated to basically to innovate, to become entrepreneurs, are normally educated to become employees. And this is what happened, for example, to people like me. So it's difficult to really prevail as an entrepreneur because the system is not really providing the right measures. We now are hopeful that this is progressively changing. However, we find that there is a huge, a very important challenge to be addressed, which is the fact that if conventional entrepreneurs are already having certain type of, let's say, difficulties because of the reasons I was mentioning, in the case of green entrepreneurs, they have to face even greater difficulties because they are not thinking only on creating a company or kind of providing a service of product that is useful for the society. I don't know, for example, somebody that wants to establish some tourist resort or a hostel, but the green entrepreneur will design this business model about developing this tourist hostel with the idea that this tourist hostel is developed in a way that is creating some kind of environmental value or social value. That means that, for example, the building is built and somehow according to some sustainability criteria, that the type of food that is served by the hostel is people were seeing the screen. Yeah. Hi. So sorry, se me dio la pelota. Okay, great. Hi. So as I was saying, I mean, the type of food served by this sustainable hostel will be in principle local ecological food. So also this entrepreneur will be bearing in mind the importance of his tourist hostel, his tourist facility in terms of helping the social, let's say, community or the local culture to be promoted by the activity he develops or she develops. So that means that this entrepreneur is required to think more than the conventional entrepreneur that wants to start some kind of tourist resort. So that's it.
I have a question for you before we move on with the next speaker, if I may. So of course you mainly target the green sectors, green, sustainable, but we can also combine the CCI with green and sustainable. So can you give us examples? Do you have examples where you have combined within the CREACT4MED program, where you have combined cultural and sustainable and green?
I'm sorry, because I won't be able to give you an answer to this, because for this kind of question, my colleague Alessandro, or any of my colleagues that in the program will be much valid because they are working specific with entrepreneurs, and I know that there are some few cases. But I would like to, I mean, once I have acknowledged that I'm sorry, I'm not able to respond to your question, I would say that even the question was very good, but is coming from a thought that we all share about differentiating green entrepreneurs from creative entrepreneurs or commercial entrepreneurs. That this is wrong. Why?
Was a bureaucratic question.
Sorry?
From a bureaucrat.
No.
I'm more like a bureaucrat who likes to put categories to all entrepreneurs to better understand. So it was a question coming more from a bureaucratic mind like mine.
No, but it's the same way as myself have thought, and probably most of the colleagues also here think, is that, I mean, our, let's say, a wish as a center, of course, it will be pretty difficult, but is that all entrepreneurs should be green. That means that it doesn't matter which kind of sector you are addressing. The thing is that you design the business model, whatever is what you are doing, in a way that is trying to create the least environmental impact possible, or the other way around, to create a positive environmental impact. And this is, I mean, this is feasible in theory, but of course very difficult, because as I was mentioning, they have much more kind of requirements to fulfill in order to do so. And in that sense, doesn't matter if the green entrepreneur or the entrepreneur that wants to create with its business, not only economic and also environmental value, social value, doesn't matter if this entrepreneur is coming from the creativity or entertainment sector, from the building sector, from the banking sector. Now I'm putting a very kind of a difficult sector that that could be really be green or sustainable. But in that sense, what we want and we consider is that we think on the idea that that our economy, our development as human beings really shifts to green and circular economy, the people who are basically the drivers of this economy, because as you know, entrepreneurs, artists, the people creating, and in that sense, and providing new services and products are the ones that are basically shaping our society. I mean, I have to repeat this in the last weeks many times. I mean, the guy who invented the wheel, the person who invented the printing, la imprenta, the printing machine, whatever, Gutenberg, okay? Or I don't know, whoever, or the guy, Elon Musk, who now basically reinvented rockets in order to not to be rockets, but be leaps, no, to the moon. So, no, Elon Musk has invented now this rocket, basically that goes to the space and goes back. So that means absolutely revolutionary, because that means that you will be able to reuse the same rocket as many times as you want. So these people are shaping the society. So depending on how the money goes in terms of supporting entrepreneurs, that will have in a society or another. So if we support entrepreneurs that are trying to build tourist resorts that are taking into account the environmental impact, we will help in the tourist industry to really shift to more green models. And the same with other kind of sectors. And just to finish, with regard to the entertainment and cultural sector, I understand, and this was basically, especially on the conversation I was having with Theo, a colleague that also is joining us, is that probably in terms of the ideas to think on how to make this kind of businesses become true, probably the people working in the creativity and the cultural industry, the artists, maybe are the ones who can have much more ideas that can be combined with entrepreneurs in order to create new solutions. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Enrique. So might go back to you afterwards, because now we move to the next speaker, who is online. Her name is Alia Arasoughly. Sorry for my bad pronunciation. Alia. She's director of Shashat from Palestine. She's a producer, director, academic, and cultural practitioner. She has gained a PhD in sociology of culture with focus on cinema. She's there? Yeah, okay, because I'm, okay, yes, I can see you, Alia, welcome. And she's a recipient of Fulbright, Ford, and Mellon fellowships. And then in 2005, she founded the Shashat Women's Cinema, an independent Palestinian cinema NGO. So, Alia, can you hear us? Yes? Yes, you would have to unmute because we can't hear you. And now I think that you are unmuted.
Yes. Greetings, everybody.
Alia, you have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I want to talk about the post-COVID, the COVID impact on the cultural sector in Palestine. Can we have the video, please, and the PowerPoint?
Ah, yes. So perhaps.
There's no sound on the video. And the PowerPoint, please.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but there was no sound on the video.
Yes. Yeah, there was sound here in the room. So all the public that's here with us in the room could listen to the sound.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
And then the next page of the PowerPoint, please, after this. Okay. What I want to address is that these figures, which we are going to see in the next slide, of tremendous, first of all, this was a major grant from the European Union over a 3-year period from 2017 to 2020. And these figures, which show how many people attended the screenings, 38,000 853. I won't repeat the figures because you can see them. Show popular and grassroots interest and participation in cultural activities. Okay, but they also show a tremendous gap that this was not followed up on. First of all, it was interrupted with COVID, as we saw from the previous slide, that some of the activities could not be carried out. During COVID also, and in the aftermath of COVID, there were 3 issues that came up. First of all, there was a survey from the Ministry of Culture on the impact of COVID on our cultural activities. We assume this was sent to all the cultural activities in Palestine. In this survey, only the emphasis on financial and health reasons, health impact of the staff was included. Nothing was included about the impact in terms of the sustainability of work that has been done on the ground in the grassroots in the West Bank and Jerusalem and in the Gaza Strip, in terms of linking those organizations, 441 organizations in 265 localities, in terms of linking what this project aimed to do, which is to create a nexus, develop a nexus, which centralizes culture in all their activities, so that in their interventions in terms of economic empowerment, governance, gender, education, identity, culture is part of that, and not get wise into what is called a cultural activity alone. And I think I want to build on what Enrique just said about children are not taught to innovate, neither are adults. And what we sought to do in this program is actually expose a large section, which we see is 38,000 people, to culture, to cinema, and to have them engage, all of those 38,000 people engaged in discussions of issues that are pertinent to Palestinian development, sustainable, let's say, social and economic development, environmental development, etc., through and cultural activities. Which means that what is missing here is that we want audiences to also be aware in order to be able to innovate. And in order to be able to innovate, then we have to enter the schools and we have to enter universities also. The problem is, first of all, is building an audience on the grassroots levels and in schools. Second is assessment of higher education curricula in the Palestinian universities and colleges and technical schools. And then what are the private and public sector approaches to culture? Okay, so we have to expose actually the general public, and not only an elite public, an educated and cultured elite public in the 3 cities, Ramallah, Jerusalem, and Bethlehem. And nor are we exposing only the cultural milieu that has relationships with production in the metropolises of Europe, because those are already linked to a certain cultural production style and innovation style. But what we want to do is to have innovation which comes from indigenous, deep indigenous roots and soils, which can be competitive then and unique on the national, regional, and international markets because of their unique use of characters, context, stories, and expressions, so that they are exploring original and creative and exciting cultural heritage, Palestinian cultural heritage in a new way, but not replicating what is being done in the metropolises of Europe. And I think this is a major gap that affects the Palestinian cultural industry sector. So in order to enter, for example, high schools, art and music classes are accepted in high schools, and they are part of the curriculum. Shashat tried to enter schools, excuse me. Shashat tried to enter schools through this project, the Yalla Chu Film Project. And now we are also engaged in trying to enter schools in one district, in one governorate in Palestine. And one has to present every single film for, let's say, a committee, which decides should it be viewed or not by school children. The criteria that is used by the Ministry of Education departments in the different governorates of exposing school children to films and cinema is that it's based on the lowest common denominator of the most traditional elements in the society. which means practically all films are banned, except, maybe the most simplistic films which don't advance innovation, reflection, or critical thinking in terms of students. So who may then develop innovation and want to innovate or grow into cultural producers. And then what the other issue is going into the higher educational system. The higher educational system, we did several years ago, which we need to update, is a study of the different media departments in Palestinian colleges and universities. And there's a very big split between theory, what is taught in theory, and what is taught in terms of actual production. What the people that teach production are usually maybe professionals in the field, and they are not savvy in terms of, let's say, film heritage, film language, etc. But they are very good at technical issues. And then the people that teach, the professors that teach, for example, film theory or film histories, etc., have no relationship to production. This lowers the quality of what products are being produced by the graduates of the different media departments in the universities, first of all. Second, it also, what we saw is that there's a big impact on women graduates, because women graduates enter the employment field usually as assistants, and they enter as coordinators of production, and not in capacities and technical capacities which allows them to innovate. Because during their education, the technical crews are usually male and favor working with male because it's just easier, simpler. And the girls usually stay behind when they are learning about equipment and when they are doing things, and they are, let's say, hesitant to experiment, and there's no proactive effort to involve women in this innovation, in innovating technically. And this is also a major handicap in terms of the universities. So there needs to be a serious look into the curriculum of different media departments in the universities, so that it's not just only technical, but has a basis in terms of aesthetics. Because there's no way that the cultural industry can really prosper without some form of, let's say, imagination, creativity, and uniqueness. Okay. In terms of the public sector does not view culture as a vector for development. The Palestinian National Plan, for example, which is 2021 to 2023, focuses on infrastructure, on very essential needs, which is water, roads, health, education, schools, schoolrooms, etc., and has not incorporated cultural activities or cultural production as a vector of development in these different areas, which can be governance, social cohesion, in the environment, the same way that, for example, what was done in terms of Rai music, for example, Rai music which emerged as an indigenous form in Algeria and became popular internationally, or Chinese martial arts, which also became internationally, let's say, known and appreciated. There's no attempt to incorporate or develop national forms that are not folkloric and are not artisanal, so that they can actually enter into or break through into regional and national and regional and international markets. So, and also the public sector is afraid of public opinion. They don't want to have any, let's say, backlash from any kind of social group, etc., or any political party or social party, etc. So, and culture is usually not safe, because culture is pushing boundaries of the self, of the identity, of let's say, perception of the other, perception of the world, etc. So culture involves innovation, not just technical innovation, but also conceptual innovation, emotional innovation, and empathy. And the public sector is usually afraid of that. They want measurable things. Okay, and so the budget, for example, the budget of the national authority concentrates on what is our basic goods, what basic needs, and the budget of the Ministry of Culture half of it, over half of it, goes actually into salaries. So it leaves very, very little money for innovation, and it leaves, and most of the, let's say, festivals and let's say cultural activities are connected with agricultural products like not mushroom, but a garlic season, grape season, etc., that involves the whole community without pushing the boundaries of these communities, so that we actually have two worlds. We have a world that is for a cultural elite in the three cities of Ramallah, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, which involves maybe several hundred people, maybe to the maximum, doesn't even reach 1,000 people. And then we have this other world, which is outside the center, which is folkloric, involved in reproduction of artifacts, etc. And I think that there can be no development of the cultural creative industries in Palestine if that other world is not involved, is not included, and is not also exposed. So in terms of foreign investment, in terms of in the Palestinian cultural industry, the security situation and the political situations are well known internationally. For example, and there has been no real, let's say, study or survey of the impact of that on the cultural industry. For example, during the 2014 war on Gaza, Shashat conducted a survey of all the audiovisual organizations in Gaza that suffered. We did it for the Prince Claus Front, for their emergency cultural emergency program. Okay. Then in 2021, we also did another survey of 49 cultural and community organizations in the Gaza Strip that we had worked with. And 18 out of the 49 suffered damages that maybe in some concepts may be minor, but for them it was major. For example, the water tanks on the roof were blown up, all the windows were shattered, front doors were blown up, etc. These cost them money to repair because they could not enter into the big reconstruction plan of Gaza. And because they could not enter into they could not wait in order to have a front door that closes or windows that have glass on them or to have water for the bathrooms or for the staff, etc. They repaired them themselves in an immediate sense. That money came from activities. And we tried to raise money in order to have those minor repairs addressed so that the organizations who are strapped from funds, of course, as cultural organizations are, don't have to spend their resources in order to do that. We couldn't. And the reason was that Shashat Women's Cinema is not, quote unquote, a humanitarian organization. Yet Shashat Women's Cinema is on the ground working with the audiovisual sector in Gaza and in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, and know very closely the impact of the war or security conditions, curfews. For example, one of our filmmakers was going for a training last week, and she was arrested, interrogated, and then released. For what? For no reason. It was a checkpoint, flying checkpoint on the road. Okay. So, and then in terms of the last war on Gaza, also in 2021, many of the filmmakers lost their homes and lost, let's say, their books. Some of them lost their equipment, etc. We were able to raise minor funding for them in order to buy those basic necessities. But we couldn't, and so we were able to support 23 families in the Gaza Strip of women filmmakers, their crews, and their actresses. But we couldn't do more. And so what the specific situation that Palestine is under and experiences on a daily basis is not a one-time crisis, it's a protracted crisis. And in this protracted crisis, there has to be a visionary perception of how to sustain and build and develop and let's say provide the resources, equipment resources, training, etc., to organizations that are working on the ground. For example, if we want to apply for a grant, I could apply for a grant, for example, for production, but can I apply for a grant for marketing our films? We have 120 films in our archive. And so the donors are a player in this. The donors, how they structure their calls, and also that most donors follow the national plans in terms of their funding to Palestine. So the national plans don't include, let's say, this kind of, let's say, re-emergence of a culture that is compatible with the industry today, like, for example, producing video games, producing TV serials that can compete on the international market.
Well, thank you, Alia, because you indeed you had a very comprehensive presentation. You touch upon many different aspects. I think you said many important things. One of which I took note, which is when you said, well, public sector doesn't really believe in the CCI, or doesn't believe that the CCI can be a vector of development. I think that it doesn't happen everywhere and every time, but it do happens in some countries, in certain countries, and it's indeed an area that we need to work on. But thank you very much for such a broad, I would say, presentation. Let us now move to the next speaker, who is Amina Benjelloun. She holds a master in management from the University of Nantes, and she started her career 32 years ago in the communication sector. And I think since then, she has been rather successful in different projects, programs, and strategies. Amina,
Hi.
are you there? Yes, there
Yes.
you are. So welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to apologize you for this organization. And I would like to introduce our federation, FIC. In Morocco, we have Industry, Cultural and Creative Federation. It's the first federation, private federation. It's 6 years old. We are structured in eight fields: cinema, audiovisual, music, events, art publishing, editing, and culture establishment, multidisciplinary. And our mission is to federate the actors of the sector for a better mobilization to impulse the new dynamics. We have a lot of convention with our culture of minister and with the international organizations like Wallonie, Brussels, Netherlands, and European Union. I would like to explain you the gaps in Morocco. We have just do a qualitative study with the Wallonie Brussels International. It's published last January. The main objective of this study is to provide institutional actors with series of propositions. The study answer how are the sector operators is organized, and identifying what are the obstacles to development and how can they be overcome. The lesson word, lesson learned in this study we have just identified 6 dimensions to warrant particular attention: transversality of culture, reform of the public subsidy model, liberalization of audiovisual sector, identifying cultural enterprise and recognition of cultural association, liberalization of copyright management, structural weakness to be overcome by training. Then we identifying gaps, major challenges. The sector growth three major challenges, notably global level. We have horizontal and vertical dialogue, state budget and public subsidies, weakness of intellectual properties right, lack of a specific support system for a cultural entrepreneur, access to data and statistics. Then we have training and employability. Skills supplies remains out to the step with the dynamic of the sector. Professional training, digital divide, and need for digital literacy. Then we have weakness of the operator on organization, leadership, management, strategic planning, financial autonomy, sustainability, audience engagement, network cooperation, monitoring, and evaluation of results, skill needs. Then we have some conclusion can be drawn from these observations. We have opportunity to develop and to be developed and unexploited potential. CCI market low barriers to entry, digitalizing of content, containers and market, mobile telephony and connectivity high penetration, increased interest of the private university sector for cultural profession growing training offer, international mobility and cooperation. We have also levers of growth. We have potential in terms of employment, the adherence of an ultra-connected youth to the dynamization of sector, opportunity to created by the convergence between creative economy, digital economies, and social and solidarity economies, potential for international expansion. Then, in Morocco, in this context, we are favorable structuring for a development of creative economy, accompaniment by the top by improving the sector governance and access by choosing to improve the employability. We have also recommendation. We hope to develop economic aspect creating to the condition for emergence of the market and governance aspect. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Amina, for giving us this perspective. Let's see if we can see you. Your presentation touched upon some very important aspects, and some were shared with Enrique and also with the previous speaker on the need to reinforce training and employability. For instance, this is a common feature for I think for everybody who comes from the sector, and also the potential and the possibility to pursue convergence with other emerging economic sectors.
Yes.
You spoke about the social and solidarity economy. Earlier on, we spoke about the blue, the green economy. So that there is, of course, potential to seek certain convergence there. So thank you very much. And now, before we break up for debate and for Q&A, in case there is, allow me to introduce you our last speaker today, who is Dr. Jessica Carson, who is a leading expert in the field of entrepreneur psychology and creative well-being. And she's currently the head of psychology and curriculum at ZenBusiness. I think that you are going to introduce more the, I was going to say the psychiatric, but it's rather the psychological part of the of what implies to be part of the CCI, as well as other sectors, because indeed for many young people nowadays and many young people involved in this sector, life is has become pretty difficult. So what do you have to say on this?
Thank you so much for having me. So yeah, my work focuses specifically on the psychology of creative and entrepreneurial individuals, and in particular looking at why certain types of personalities are more likely to self-select into creative and entrepreneurial work. Because, you know, when you're starting a small business, for the most part, most problems, I'm so sorry if you hear someone's trying to ring my doorbell. Most problems are human problems. You know, many entrepreneurs, many creators struggle with obstacles that are very human, psychological in nature. You know, it's overwhelm, it's confusion, it's apathy, it's uncertainty, it's insecurity, it's doubt, it's fear. And what's interesting is that the research has actually shown that entrepreneurs as a population are actually much more likely to struggle with things like mental health issues, things like depression, ADHD, addiction, and bipolar in particular. They're more likely to suffer from things like stress-related illness, things like insomnia, gut and GI issues, things like that that are a result of stress, as well as just an assortment of sort of cognitive and intellectual idiosyncrasies. You know, entrepreneurs tend to be a bit quirky, or they tend to have their brains are wired in a different way. There's a much higher rate of things like dyslexia in particular among entrepreneurs. And so what's really interesting is to think about why the rates of this distress is so high among entrepreneurs in particular. And many people assume that it's just the stress of the work. You know, the stress of the work is causing everyone to exacerbate all of these underlying mental and physical issues. But that's actually not the full story. The full story, and sorry, I'm just, texting the person who's at the door. The full story is that the types of challenges like depression, like ADHD, like addiction, like bipolar, like dyslexia, actually confer adaptive advantages onto the individual in the entrepreneurial context. And so what I mean by that is the rates of these challenges are so high in entrepreneurs, you know, not because the work is just so stressful, but because people with those diagnoses are more likely to choose to become entrepreneurs. And the reason for that is when you look at the research on many of the bright sides of these challenges, we actually see many mission critical attributes that are essential to entrepreneurial success. So for instance, when we look at something like ADHD, we see much higher rates of creativity, innovativeness, the ability to hyper focus on things that we're particularly interested in, higher levels of sociability and extroversion, higher curiosity and ability to sort of connect the dots from multiple inputs. Even when we look at things like depression, you know, researchers believe the reason that something like depression has survived through our evolutionary history is because it is adaptive in the sense that it allows us to sort of step back, observe a problem, ruminate on it, really think complexly about it, and then create something in the aftermath of that reflection, like a book or like a company or like solving a complex business or cultural or creative problem. And so, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is I love flipping the script on why entrepreneurs tend to struggle more than most. For anyone who is struggling a little bit, maybe with the way that they're engaging with their work, and it's more likely that it's actually has something to do with your strengths, with what makes you much more likely to succeed as an entrepreneur. And so, from that perspective, this kind of work is very optimistic and very hopeful. And so in terms of, you know, what I encourage entrepreneurs to do, there's nothing sort of magical or remarkable here that other people, you know, are not familiar with. It's creating a community, really getting very clear on your sense of why or purpose or what drives you or your ikigai or however you want to kind of frame it, because coming back to that core why is a really powerful way to overcome many of these sort of inevitable emotional obstacles of entrepreneurship. Seeking out different kinds of mindfulness strategies that feel good to you, whether that's meditation or breath work, finding coaches, mentors, or therapists. But I think the most important thing is, you know, being easy on yourself, because as a creative, as an entrepreneur, you are probably wired with certain idiosyncrasies that make you more creatively powerful, but also perhaps in many ways more sensitive or more prone to distress in some ways. And that's just the way you're wired. And so the message is one of acceptance.
Thank you very much, Jessica. We can also applaud her. Thank you. I have a question for you because, of course, you presented CCI entrepreneurs as almost like superhumans in the sense that, of course, they have difficult environment. Psychologically, being an entrepreneur already puts you in a different perspective than if you are like a regular and normal person like me, for instance. But have you really noticed an increase of mental health problems in the among, let's say, entrepreneurs, or among those that are part of CCI or disruptive sectors? Because at the university, for instance, where I work, we have noticed an increase of mental disorders among PhD students, those that are faced with higher difficulties. And in case you have, what is your advice to basically combat this trend, if I may say?
Yeah, so yes, the research has shown that in particular, depression, ADHD, addiction, and bipolar are significantly higher in entrepreneurs than non-entrepreneurs. And in particular, bipolar is actually 11 times higher in entrepreneurs than non-entrepreneurs. So huge statistical significance there. And again, the belief is that the reason for that is when we actually look at people who have bipolar tendencies, which is the combination to be, you know, more manic, more energetic, confident, brash, you know, opportunistic, combined with those lower depressive periods where maybe there's more reflection, there's more rumination. When you merge those together, one could argue that you actually have an extremely effective entrepreneur. You have someone who has the confidence to go out and to sell and to build, but then you also have someone who has the ability to kind of strategize, to reflect, and to create. You know, there are a lot of reasons why people who, for instance, maybe are getting their PhDs or who are a bit more high intellectual horsepower individuals may be more likely to struggle with these types of things. One of my favorite psychological theories is called the hyperbrain, hyperbody theory of integration. And basically what that proposes is that people with higher IQs are more prone to both mental and physical illness. And the reason for that is our nervous systems are so open. They're noticing, they're perceiving, they're feeling, they're sensing, they're connecting. Think about like the really smart people you know. They're so on. Their nervous systems are just drinking everything in. And while that can be a true source of creative brilliance or intellectual brilliance, it can also be a lot on the nervous system, right? It can wear it down, it can exhaust it. And that leads to things like mental and physical illness. So it's one of those things where, the greater the light, the greater the shadow, I guess. But it's certainly not something to be ashamed of. And it's something that there's plenty of support, around. I know mental illness is a huge thing right now. And in terms of support, I would say, my strategies that I shared earlier, whether it's community, or it's connecting to purpose, or it's finding mindfulness strategies, or it's finding mentors or therapists or what have you, is, they're tried and true.
Thank you. I'm sure there are lots of questions and comments. Please, Rimayadi.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for this new perspective, which practically I added to the program. From the point of view where I think there is a clear interaction between creativity and mental health. And this is also part of the project that we launched already a couple of years ago with Harris Ayer. Then also we have a couple of colleagues here, Theo and Salvador, who are working on this dimension on creativity and how creativity could foster, in fact, value-added entrepreneurship. So really focusing on high performance from the point of view of mental capabilities. But at the same time that you're talking, I see a positive interaction with actually certain mental disorders that could even foster creativity and high performing. And instead of really focusing on the stigmas of those type of situations, rather to understand them and provide the infrastructures for them to really prosper and they really become at full potential, rather than looking at them that they are probably different, or maybe there are disorders that might eventually be dissuading them, in fact, from their full potential. And this is what we're trying to do, in fact, in the Brain Capital initiative that we are developing, and linking this, in fact, to high-performing entrepreneurship and what it means, putting in place what I call the right infrastructure. You mentioned, for example, a system of therapies, or eventually mentorship. And I'm looking at all the incubators. Of course, this is something different. This is a dimension which, as I mentioned, I wanted to add to reflection. It's not included in the CREACT4MED project, because we are not looking at aspects related to health. But because of the COVID, and seeing also that we're seeing that the rate of depression is going up right after, and also the rate of other type of aspects that is growing up, particularly in the youth community. We're trying really to better understand and avoid this type of, I would say, extreme cases to happen via positive approaches, which eventually can become even transformative in their own sake. So thank you very much for bringing this aspect, and we will work together within our other projects also to mainstream this new thinking. Thank you, Jessica.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Or if there are none, I have one, because indeed, I thought about these health dimension in specifically in the CCI sector. I mean, the last week, as I said, I was discussing with a number of CCI entrepreneurs and also their, let's say, their federation at the city level of Barcelona. And they told me, well, in Barcelona, of course, I said it before, the CCI sector is already accounting for 14% of the GDP of the city. We have, and I'm not an expert of that because I'm not a user, but we have 4 main festivals, like very, very quite large, Sonar, Barcelona Sound, Cruïlla, and Primavera Sound, yes, Primavera Sound, Cruïlla, and a 4th one. I was going to say the Mobile World, but it's not the Mobile. It's not a concert. No. But they were telling me, but these 4 events, which are quite large, and they might gather altogether more than 1 million visitors, they are still weak. They are weak, and I told them, but why is that weak? Well, because they are owned by local companies rather than by multinationals. So the normal thing, if you go to a European city, is that these concerts are being owned by multinationals. Here they are owned by small companies, by SMEs, and they organize every year these concerts, and they feel somehow weak. And they were telling me, and this is creating a lot of psychological pressure onto our workers because they don't know if they will be able to keep their jobs in the future, if they will be able to not only to secure jobs, but to grow as companies, as SMEs in the CCI sector. And they told me, and this is quite a structural problem of the CCI sector. I mean, this precariousness that you can see it also in the the Palestinian representative was talking about the difficulties that the Palestinian filmmaking industry had. If you think about the world of theater or any like subsector related to CCI, somehow associated to this precariousness that triggers, I wouldn't say mental health problems, but of course there are, even though we're speaking of superhumans, as Jessica was saying, because people are creative, and people creative, to me, they have higher value than at least intellectually speaking than the rest. They still suffer from these mental problems. So I think that it's a very important issue, and I thank you for including it in the program. So please.
I mean, I would to close, I would add, I believe that anything that gives us a unique perspective, a unique lens on life and work, whether that's a lived experience or that's something related to our genetics, related to the way our brains and our nervous systems interact with the world, anything that gives us that just that slight perspective shift over others inevitably gives us a competitive advantage, because we're able to see things and put things together in a way that others can't. And I say this as someone who is, kind of had to come to terms with a lot of my own areas of uniqueness and sensitivities and idiosyncrasies. To be able to see them as strengths, I think, is such an invaluable tool, in the same way that if you have a certain degree, you have a different perspective, you have a different advantage. If your brain is wired a little bit differently, you have a different perspective and a different advantage. And I would love to create and foster an entrepreneurial ecosystem that moves away from this misguided sort of masculine concept of stoicism and keep calm and carry on, and don't cry, boys don't cry, or whatever, and really lean into that which makes our own creative expression very unique, very authentic, which is our very personal lived experience.
Great. So we had somebody who raised her hand. First, okay, please.
So I just wanted to reinforce and applaud Jessica and the Rim comment. Without mental health, it's not possible to be innovative, creative. We know from neurology, when our brain is swimming in negative hormones as cortisol, innovation, creativity are not possible. So as they are saying, as also Brain Capital Alliance is showing, we need to ensure mental health. There are some studies saying that even 40% of PhD students are facing depression. It's much more about anxiety. 2 weeks ago, I was seated with people from the Generalitat de Catalunya of the health department just discussing about these topics. So health, mental health, is key. Brain health is a key. And also it's very interesting what Jessica was saying, because when we think about depression, it's not all just bad news. I think, as we were discussing with Edmund some time ago, we must understand that also there is some studies that are referring to melancholia. What I want to say is that depression has been always part of the human history. Aristotle, Socrates, Plato were talking about melancholia. And there is a wonderful book from a philosopher, Hoke Herbsen, that says that melancholy is part of human beings' life, because when we understand that we are going to die, or when we are small, or we are a child, and we suddenly discover we are not part of the universe, of the planet, or the world, and we are isolated beings, this makes us to be melancholic. But the most important thing is that they say that we have a positive way to confront it, and how we can confront it through creating purpose or meaning, as Jessica was saying, but also through creativity and also understanding interdependence. So I close my intervention going back to the great intervention of Enrique. For example, if I am feeling eco-anxiety, that it's a new mental health diagnosis, the anxiety I am feeling due connected to climate change, what I'm gonna do? I'm just going to take pills, more pills, and just make the pharmaceutical more richer, or I can contribute and be a green entrepreneur. Because then I give meaning to my life, I connect with my creativity, with my brain, but also with our common interdependence. So I think it's a good example. So entrepreneurship, creativity, innovation can be a powerful answer to these problems. Thank you.
I just want to say I love that comment. And one thing that I talk about a lot, and I include this in my book, is that research has actually found that entrepreneurs tend to have a more, and forgive the use of this word, I know this is a loaded term, but more spiritual orientation than non-entrepreneurs. And what's meant by that is there is a higher drive towards self-actualization. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this quest to fulfill our potentialities, to leave a legacy, to have peak experiences, to find purpose and meaning and passion. And so people who are oriented in that way there is a light and a dark to that. And the light side of that is that, we're willing to tolerate a great amount of discomfort to fill the gap between our current reality and our greatest potentiality. And that often happens through the creative and entrepreneurial act that comes through creating something that's uniquely ours. The dark side of that is the melancholy that you speak of, because people who are oriented that way tend to be plagued by a certain existential affliction, where if they feel like they're not living up to their purpose, if they feel like their work is meaningless, if they feel like they're not expressing themselves authentically, there can be a sense of melancholy or apathy or lethargy, which is why many of these types fail to thrive in more traditional workplaces. And so, in many ways, entrepreneurship can be a great cure for melancholy, right? Because you're putting yourself on that path towards purpose. That said, people who are more oriented towards melancholy, which I would consider myself one of them, that's always sort of a motivator for better or for worse. But I do really appreciate that connection between melancholy and the pursuit of entrepreneurial and creative purpose.
Thank you. Thank you first for a very, very interesting, insightful intervention. I would like to build on what you were saying earlier about the precariousness on the cultural creative industries. As much I think it's important to work on solution you came up with around the alleviating the symptom of it, working on the negative side of the pressure what the sector is living. But I think you also need to work on the roots. And this precariousness, it depends on the creative sector, from a sector to another. When it's related to seasonality, let's say performing arts sector, these are more precarious because it's very hard to project what's coming on because they work in seasons. There are summer seasons, festival seasons. So the seasonality is not as much the real problem, because from the Middle Ages, when the Saltimbank are created and work around, the fact that is seasonal, there was never a problem. The real problem is there is no safety nets. There is no system that can support to deal with that precariousness. So in other society and ecosystem, there are safety net system, there's social security, there is those like in France, le poste de net d'ermitant, something has been done to deal with that and relieve a lot of that pressure on the creative people. But in most of the ecosystem, I'm talking in the name of the global south, that's quasi inexistent. So I think one of the real root problem of depression or things is the lack of safety nets, of backup systems that could relieve a lot of that pressure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And when you think about, for those who are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I just brought up, safety and security is, towards the base of that. And so really entrepreneurship is one big exercise in lack of control, right? It's not having as much predictability, having more ambiguity, having more uncertainty, more newness. And this is where actually things like people who are genetically wired to be more predisposed to addiction, whether or not they are addicts, if it is a genetic, tend to actually be better able to tolerate newness, change, ambiguity, intensity, risk, all of those things. It's related to the dopaminergic system and sort of the preference for risk and for thrill and for sort of newness in life. And so this is just one of those ways that someone who is oriented more towards addiction is actually going to be better able to tolerate the uncertainty of entrepreneurship. But for the vast majority of people, uncertainty is, I would say, probably the biggest reason why ventures fail, because it's a tremendous amount of, just kind of floating in the ocean without a life raft. And so, the extent to which those types of both emotional and financial safety nets can be created, I think that we would see a dramatic increase in people starting and sticking with businesses.
Thank you, Jessica. We'll take a final question and then wrap up and closing, please.
Hello, I'm also a psychologist and I'm a researcher. So I started just I'm researching work in the cultural and creative sector for 15 years. And what I realized in this time that it's very important to also not just acknowledge all these psychological knowledge, but also we have to somehow include the psychology and so on. So these systematic problems you were talking about. So you said at the beginning, Yegane, is your name Yegane, that in the sector there is a lack of data availability. Yeah. So in Slovenia, we had this huge research we were working on for the last 2.5 years, and to really understand the working and living conditions of creative and cultural workers. And what we realized is, the precariousness is huge. It's 60% of people is very insecure working conditions. Yeah. And what is another thing is social class. Social class is very important. 18% of people, just 18% of people from working classes can work in the field. Because what we realize is that this social insecurity, you know, you have like family members or friends or partners who compensate money, you know, that you can experiment. And if you don't have this backup, you cannot even enter the field and start creating and experimenting and so on. And another thing what we realize is it's like this age, really age limit. It's like when you talk to younger people, because we are mixing qualitative and quantitative research. And when we had interviews and you talk to younger creatives, you know, they are very optimistic. They are very optimistic. They say like, okay, maybe, you know, like it's possible to fail, but, you know, I have this unique, you know, talents and I can do it, you know. But at the age of 35, this like approximately this like shift changes. Why? Because the people, you know, did this circle of error, trial and error so many times, you know, that it's like evident it's not just about you, you know, it's also about the environment. And you are also postponing some big, you know, life task, like you cannot afford to, I don't know, to buy a flat or to marry or to have children. And the first, because of the stress and these very precarious working conditions, the first chronic illnesses come in. So I think it's very important that like we talk about like our potentials, but we really have to also have this, yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if the speakers would like to have a very final say. If not, it's not compulsory, then I would like to thank you very much. I think it was a very interesting panel. We touch upon many different aspects, some more, let's say, formal on how problems are posed by the public sector itself, or by the private sector itself, or by the problems of environment and how entrepreneurs interact with such an environment, and what can be the reactions to these obstacles, sometimes of developing this superhuman mentality or attitude, and some other times developing certain mental disorders, mental diseases, which is of course not hopeful, not neither helpful. But in any case, thank you very much for your time, for sharing these thoughts with all of us. And now I think that we're moving to a coffee break, little coffee break of 10 minutes, and then we are starting with the next session. Thank you.